On this week's podcast, we are talking the July market report.
Got a 46% year-on-year increase in the amount of properties being sold in Dubai.
46% in a year is wild.
Yeah.
Probably an oversupply at some point. We've got all the data, all the snapshots. We've got some increases. Property prices, what have you seen growth in the last 12 months?
In July against July, 22% increase on average.
Which is wild.
It's phenomenal. 200% increase in off-plan sales.
And even a decrease.
So the average letting price is actually 2% down year-on-year.
For rentals in particular, though, summer tends to be reasonably busy because obviously a lot of people tend to move into country. We talk everything Dubai real estate.
At some point, there will be a softening in the market.
Yep.
It just has to happen.
Only two things that will really stop this momentum right now of Dubai's property prices. So check out Taking Care of Business. You can get it on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Watch it. I'm joined by myself and Paul Kelly. Let's go. We're back on Taking Care of Business. This week we are talking about July's property market report, what has happened in the sizzling summer of Dubai. We are joined by our operations director, Paul Kelly.
Hello.
Paul, talk to me. What is happening in Dubai? Give me the numbers. Hit me up. What's happening?
Well, let's start off with the headline lots of people always like to hear, which is the average price per square foot. In July, we saw this go to 1,397 dirhams a square foot, which is an all-time high, but it's kind of month on month we're breaking this record at the moment. But to put it into perspective, it's a 17% increase on July last year and 13% above the last peak. So lots of interest in the market, lots of transactions.
So 1,400 dirhams, let's call it, per square foot. What's that roughly in pounds if you use your quick maths? Are we talking...
£300?
About £300 per square foot. So I quite often dip my toes into the UK property market. I have stuff in Birmingham, Manchester, London. Looking at stuff at Birmingham at the moment. Anything pretty nice, you're looking at £600 plus per square foot. Quite similar to Manchester, 620, 630. So Dubai as a whole is actually cheaper than Manchester and Birmingham as a whole if you look at like newer products. So that smacks it, bang in the face with what Dubai is still offering value. And people may, watching or listening to this, may think, you've just said Dubai's hit the highest point of it's ever been. How can you say there's value? If you compare it to any major city and even second or third cities in a lot of countries.
On a global scale, we often have people moving here, obviously, from all around the world. And depending where people come from, they actually think Dubai is cheap. Mm-hmm. So it does go to show, like you say, that there's an incredible amount of value in Dubai. And this is another reason why so many different things happen around the world. And every time something happens, people gravitate towards Dubai. The safety is one of the things, lifestyle's another thing, but also the investment potential is still it sounds strange to say this of Dubai, but it's still quite up and coming on a global scale. Yeah. It's still a good time to get involved in the market.
It may not sound cheap, and it's all relative if you were living here and it's what you've been used to or what you've known. But for someone certainly outside, tremendous value. And I think Dubai's growth story is actually ahead of itself. There's still a lot to happen, and I think more people coming to the country will play a part in that.
Definitely. And to kind of further solidify those points, to bring it back to another stat, sales value, so that's the total value of properties sold, increased 22% year on year, increased slightly from June, but volume is huge. 10% increase on June, which is significant because obviously July you'd think is a quieter month, but a 46% year-on-year increase in the amount of properties being sold in Dubai.
Is that total volume, do you say, or value?
Volume. 46%,
So the amount of transactions that happen, individual transactions, is 46% in a year is wild.
Yeah.
I don't suppose we have the data on whether that's broken down in off-plan and actually ready purchases.
So I'd have to do some quick maths. 61% is off-plan transactions.
Yeah.
So 14,000, what's that? Maybe 8,500, 9,000 is off-plan.
So put this into context. So if there was a 46% increase versus last year, there was how many thousands?
14,774 properties sold in July.
So most of these properties were probably sold if they're off-plan, probably March.
Yep.
And obviously we had a huge influx of new launches this year. Typically takes from the point of reservation to then SPA and being registered probably more than 3 months actually, probably at the start of the year, maybe close to 6 months. So bit of understanding for people seeing these figures. any off-plan launch, any off-plan figures you're seeing, they're probably from sales that were done 4 to 6 months ago. And then obviously there's a bit of a lag on registration.
Yeah, one of the popular stats we've spoke about a few times on the pod is there was a launch on average every 17 hours so far from the start of this year. So it's no surprise we're seeing these figures, I guess.
Which we've seen during the summer, which is obviously you don't blame developers. In Dubai, if typically a large portion of the population travels because it is very hot, and obviously making the most of kids being off from school. Not many launches happening over the summer, so you would expect September to end of November, maybe mid-December to have.
I would expect to see what we saw at the start of the year, basically, which is a huge influx of. And to be honest, even ourselves in the industry, at times it's hard to keep up with every launch that's happening on a daily basis, or sometimes 2-3 a day. But I would expect there's clearly such a huge demand in the market at the moment. I would expect developers, like you say, from September to be straight back out there again.
What about, do we have the data on how many handovers have happened this year, or how many properties have been developed? I know obviously in July itself, we've seen just shy of 3,000 properties that were basically handed over. The keys, they were completed, keys were handed to owners. Where does that look on a scale from the year as a whole? Are we working towards that 70,000 number, do you think?
No, is the short answer.
Yeah.
And I know that was a prediction at the start of the year. I think we'll fall between maybe 40 to 50,000 properties handed over for the year, which sounds like a lot. But when we consider the population increased in the first 6 months by far more than 40 or 50,000 people, I think Dubai's just keeping up with the population increase, keeping up with what's going on. I mean, even last week we had the huge stock market activity, and I know it's clawed its way back a little bit now, but that'll bring a fresh impetus of investment and people into Dubai. So I think, yes, it sounds like a lot of handovers, but in the reality of a fast-growing city in terms of the economy and the population, I think it's trying to keep up with the demand that's in the market at the moment.
Whilst talking about off-plan stuff, so there's been so much launch. At some point, we're going to have probably an oversupply at some point. When do you think that might happen? Because we've had so much happen in the first 6 months this year, and certainly last year also. We're averaging, let's call it 50,000 properties handing over a year. Surely that number has to increase over the next few years. I
think we're talking off camera, weren't we? Is it 2026 or 27? There's going to be a couple of 100,000 units handed over. Obviously, providing or building project deadlines are met and what have you. It'd be really interesting at that point. Again, on the surface, we look at that now, sat here, and think 200,000 units handing over in the next 2 or 3 years. That's a lot for any city anywhere in the world to cope with. And it might be at that point that we do see a bit of a change in the market, a bit of adjustment maybe, because there is so much supply out there. But then again, who knows what's going to happen in the world over the next couple of years? Who knows how many people are going to continue to come and live and invest in Dubai and want to be here? Like, another interesting stat, just to relate it back a little bit, is apartments made up 81% of all sales volume within July, which is a 63% increase year on year. And when we spoke to Jess last week on the podcast, she was saying that her team are seeing, who's our sales progression, they handle all the sales through to transfer, a huge increase in first-time buyers. So the landscape and the dynamic of the city's changing too much. Sat here now, we can say maybe in a couple of years it looks like, because of the supply coming into the market, maybe that could be a bit of a headwind to the market. But again, who knows? Because
there could be a softening if the trajectory of the population continues at the same ilk. There's no increase. However, I was listening to podcasts over the weekend, and they're talking about the new Labour government, some of the changes they're looking to bring in. There's a budget happening end of October. And they talked about potentially increasing capital gains tax up to 45%.
It's crazy.
Which, if you are someone with wealth, you're going to have money, and obviously you're going to liquidate certain things over time. You're probably not going to stick around in the UK if there's a 45% capital gains tax. So again, huge opportunity for Dubai to attract even more people.
Do you know what? I think that's definitely a factor. But for anyone that's seen what's happened in the UK over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think that's also a factor.
Yeah.
People are, and I love the UK. I've had a great time there over the summer, so I'm not negative towards the UK, but I think with the economy and with with everything that's happening over there, I think a lot of people have had enough now, and they want to, for whatever reason it might be, they want to get out and they want to experience something else in the world.
Property prices, what have you seen growth in the last 12 months? We know we talked on volume, but what we've seen in terms of the price increases as an average?
So year on year, July against July, 22% increase on average.
Which is wild.
It's phenomenal.
Which is wild. I'd suggest at the start of the year, from the calendar year, we would see single-digit growth. So 9, maybe 10, 11%, which is the sign of a normal property market. It'll be interesting to see when we look back at the end of this year, when we go January to December, will we look close to that, or will we be nearing the 20% increase?
But I think that was a fair judgment at the start of the year. But what we can never account for is what happens during the year. And again, whether it be stock market activity, whether it be geopolitics, whether it be social politics in different countries in the world, like we just referenced the UK, these are all factors that can just, we all know that whenever something's happening in the world, Dubai tends to benefit. So what we can't judge at the start of the year is what might happen during the year. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do see 15 to 20% by the end of the year.
Do you know, so lots of people I continue to ask about pricing. There's only two things that will really stop this momentum right now of Dubai's property prices. The first thing is a black swan moment, thing that no one sees coming, which we hope won't be the case. The second thing is Dubai will only stop itself. That's the only reason this momentum will slow down. So just give you some examples. 10 years ago, Dubai had lowered the loan-to-value rate, so meaning you had to put more money in to buy a property. And equally at the same time, they doubled the stamp duty, the transfer fees, to basically cool the marketplace. We don't think that's going to happen. I think Dubai now believes the fundamentals, and there's enough people actually putting their roots down here and buying rather than just a speculative investment. And actually, if you actually look what's happened in the last 18 months, 2 years with the interest rate rises, anywhere else in the world, you've probably seen a softening of property prices or even declines. That should have happened here also. If you increase interest rates, typically property prices soften. Yeah. It hasn't happened here. So if it hasn't happened in the last 2 years with interest rates going up, and we're now likely to probably see some softening of interest rates the back end of this year, that will only play into property prices continuing to grow over the next certainly 12 months.
Definitely. Unless at some point there will be a softening in the market. Yep. It just has to happen. Property markets are cyclical. It can't go up and up and up forever.
Yep.
But what we're speculating on now is when it might soften. And at the moment, like you say, there's no immediate signs that there's going to be any short-term let-up in terms of what's going on.
My dad always once told me that something's only a loss when you sell.
Yeah.
So in the event that prices did come down, unlike 10, 12 years ago where we had a huge influx of people panicking, selling, trying to release equity to basically take money out of what they purchase, in the event that prices did ever go down, and whether it's small softening, I don't think we'll see that anywhere near as the levels we did 10 years ago, because there are so many home investors where if the prices go down, of course, you're not going to want to know, you're not going to like to see that. But if you're living there, it doesn't really matter. And it only matters when you actually exit and sell.
It's very true. And also there's so much equity in the market now with, as you mentioned before, the loan to value rates and people needing 20, 25% cash in properties, 40% if it's a second property. People aren't going to be in desperate situations like they have been in the past. So definitely it won't be nice to see. Maybe there'll be some more properties coming to the market, but I definitely don't think it'll be like we've seen them before with Dubai when something goes wrong or there's a softening. And it's almost as if in the past sentiment's driven the property market in Dubai, especially on a downward trend. But I think you're spot on. I don't think that'll be the pattern in the future.
So what else is happening?
Interestingly, so there's, and again, we're coming back to Dubai making itself a more attractive proposition for people to stay here for the long term. And part of that is the huge generation of like parks, wellness areas, et cetera. A couple of months ago, there was a huge green spine that was announced along the 311. Now, it could be coincidence, might not be coincidence. But the biggest activity in the off-plan and residential market has been along that green spine over the course of the last month. So the green spine is along the 311. We've seen huge amounts of transactions around the JVC area, for example. Huge amounts of transactions around Dubai Hills as well. And the off-plan side of things, Dubai Residential Complex was actually the busiest for launches within July itself. So I think people both on investor and end user side are really buying into what Dubai is creating at the moment and the lifestyle that it's now creating and offering to people, and really putting the money into it, really. I say they're buying into it literally by investing in these areas.
What conundrums does that offer for existing developments and developers that aren't as green? Because obviously when you see all these new products that are coming in 2 years, 3 years' time, the facilities and the amenities are absolutely incredible, stunning. Very green, very well. You know, I think a large part of Dubai and probably the world are certainly more health-oriented now. You see more information, more data, more shows, people talking about health and wellness. So it's a big focus on a lot of communities. Is there a danger of some of the existing communities being left behind because they don't have this attractive anchor or pull of what these new communities do have? And we've probably seen that with Til Al Gaf a little bit, right?
Definitely. And I think so. The advantage of some of the more established communities at the moment is location. Yeah. They obviously got first pick, I guess, all those years ago in terms of the plots of land. So they're always going to maintain a demand for the location that they're in. As a famous property saying, location, location, location. But I think a lot of owners associations at the moment are probably going to be looking around at the newer launches and looking to see how they can rework and improve existing communities. Because I think some communities in Dubai will struggle in 3 or 4 years. All these handovers that we're talking about are going to happen in 3 or 4 years. These incredible communities that we're talking about, like you say, for health and wellness and running tracks, cycle tracks, et cetera, some of the existing communities are going to struggle to compete against that.
Do you know, talking about Dubai being green, is it refreshing? I'm driving around lots of places and there's so much greenery being planted, and it's obviously a nice change of scenery from the nice desert, sandy roads, disused areas. It's just making Dubai look even more.
Yeah. No, it's true, because 10 years ago, I referenced before going back to the UK, we go back every summer. 10 years ago, you'd be in the UK and you'd be so excited to go back. And it sounds weird to anyone who's not lived in the UK and Dubai, but it's all the greenery and the trees and everything. Like, this is amazing. But now there's not nearly as much of a contrast between the UK and, don't get me wrong, if you go to the countryside in the UK, it's a lot more green, but your normal residential, suburban communities, streets, et cetera, there's not as stark a difference anymore between Dubai and the UK. And it is refreshing. It is nice. Yeah. It's nice to see.
Maybe that's a play on seeing more Europeans moving into country over the last few years.
Yeah, it will be. And again, I think Dubai's built so much and attracted so many people. And now the project is keep attracting the people, but also, it sounds like a business, but retaining the people they've got. And how do you do that? Is by offering, as daft as it sounds, greenery, lifestyle choices, wellness, et cetera, making people enjoy where they live and want to stay here as opposed to go anywhere else.
Okay.
Good. Do you want some more stats?
Yes, I'd love some more stats. I'm sure everyone else watching wants some more stats.
Okay. A&A sales, Allsopp and Allsopp sales, kind of in line with the market, 200% increase in off-plan sales in July this year compared to last year. However, our recording of the sales is we've actually sold those properties in July. So these ones aren't ones that we sold earlier in the year and just have been registered in July. This is our transaction. So
the difference between our data and the data the land department record is about a 3 to 4 month lag.
Yeah.
So we record our data at the point of a sale being agreed, and the land department will record, rightly so, when something's been transferred to a new owner.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a good indication of our data, should be a good indication of what's going to happen in the land department over the coming months. And it's good to see that in July, which is traditionally probably a quieter month because everybody travels, like you say.
Just some context, and this will be same for many, many businesses in Dubai. At any one point, around 25 to 30% of our entire workforce were on annual leave.
Yeah. Wherever
they were going. And that'd be like a lot for a lot of businesses.
Yeah. And coming on to mortgage activity, which is again an indication of buyer sentiment and how busy we can expect the sales market to be over the next 2 or 3 months. July was our second highest ever month for mortgage activity. So when we say activity, transactions, obviously. So again, in a summer month to be our second biggest month for mortgage activity. So this is people getting their pre-approvals, getting everything in place with us. You would think spells for this month, for August, September and October, that will translate into property transactions because we've got all these buyers in the market now. We've got their mortgage approved and are actively hunting for a property. So again, for that kind of stat to happen in July, I think speaks volumes for where the market is and where it probably is for the rest of the year. What else have I got here for you? 22% viewing increase. So increase in people out viewing compared to July last year.
Which is, again, crazy. Anyone out in the heat? I went for a walk this morning and there was not one dry part of my body. So anyone out actually in the heat, going out viewing, clearly very serious. The fact the numbers are huge jump on last year is...
And I think these numbers, because quite a few of the stats we're talking about are in double digits and 20% this, 46%, you kind of get a bit used to saying them, but a 22% increase year on year is huge, really. So
that's the amount of people actually physically going out and viewing properties.
Your property. Yeah. And again, like you say, in this heat is they're only serious. You're not wasting your time going out in this heat. Nationalities is one we like to keep an eye on because, again, I think it tells a story for what's going on around the world. Americans ranked number 4 in our top buyer nationalities this month. And the significance of that is Americans never really get into top 5 of people who buy properties with us. So we've either got a lot more popular with Americans, I was going to say our friends from across the pond, but that's quite a British political statement to make. Or there's more people from America moving to Dubai and looking to purchase.
Maybe people are sick of the political ongoings over there. You don't know. What's happened in the rental market? Because obviously a large portion of our clients typically when they move to Dubai, certainly for the first 12 months and beyond, tend to rent first. What's happening in rentals?
Again, really interesting stats. So viewings, 43% increase on July last year, which is frightening. In terms of transactions, a 19% increase on June this year. Now, again, traditionally, you should think that July will be quieter than June for the reason we spoke about before. But to see just shy of a 20% increase in transactions in what should be the quietest month of the year it tells a story.
For rentals in particular, though, summer tends to be reasonably busy because obviously a lot of people tend to move into country, try and get the kids settled, whether it's a new school or maybe relocate to move within another school within Dubai. So I think that's quite an important thing.
Yeah, no, and that is true and it plays into it and that does happen. But I still think it's, when we look at stats on previous years, it's rare to see a 19% increase in July compared to June. Highest rental transaction, 1.9 million. So there's, again, at the top end of the market, there's still a lot of activity. And apartments, again, similar to the sales side, apartments are leading the way hugely in terms of the popularity and what type of property people are going for, which spells new people moving to the city, which we know is happening quite literally by the plane load at the moment.
So we're talking about an 80-20 split on apartments versus villas, which probably, to be fair, if you look at the inventory across Dubai as a whole, it's similar split probably with villas and apartments, really.
But what we saw, and this is going back to COVID and kind of after COVID, is the figures became distorted in that there's a lot more villa transactions. Understandably, people have been locked down, et cetera, wanted more space, and there's less people coming to Dubai for a while. That trend, I think we can say, is completely reversed now, and to pre-COVID levels of transaction types and transaction activity and people moving into Dubai. Interestingly, which again talks to more people moving into Dubai because they have less liquidity, there's a 25% increase in people paying their rent in 4 checks or more. So the reason all these stats are interesting, they all knit together to tell the same story.
So landlords have been a little bit more flexible. So if the prices have gone up, they're probably realising that to get top price, they perhaps need to be a little bit more flexible in frequency of payments.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it still blows my mind that checks are even still anywhere around this. I know obviously direct debits are coming in, and we're certainly from a management perspective, we're
so 80% of our managed inventory, which is in the thousands, so a significant amount of amount of active rental contracts, just over 80% are done by direct debit now through the Encudi system. So we've had a huge push internally to drive people that way. It's easier for tenants. It's easier for landlords.
Yeah, totally. What about rental prices? 'Cause I'm not too sure we've covered that. Are we seeing similar numbers to sales? What's been the increase year on year for rentals, or certainly for the calendar year so far this year? Interesting to know that.
So I'm actually just flicking through this now to try and find it for you.
And is there any difference with villas and apartments?
Yeah, there is. Bear with me 1 second. So the average letting price is actually 2% down year on year.
Okay.
So it stands at the moment at 181,000 dirhams is the average rental price. We can break that down in terms of villas and apartments. So the average villa townhouse letting price is 268,000.
Yeah.
And the average apartment letting price is 142,000.
What can we take from that? Because if our numbers are showing, are they our numbers?
Yeah, sorry, this is Allsopp and Allsopp data.
Okay, so if our numbers are showing a 2% down, do we take that as prices down 2%, or is there a particular transaction from maybe a year ago it might have thrown things out, or?
So there's two kind of facets to this answer. One, I would say we've been doing these reports for a while now, and our data is usually in track with the market, in line, not dead on, but usually in track. However, what we can say is, for example, last year, we highlighted a moment ago one transaction at 1.9 million. If last year we had 3 transactions at 1.9 million, that will distort the figures slightly, obviously. It's a 2% change. It's hard to read into it too much at the moment. It could be based on 1 or 2 transactions. It could be a sign of the market shifting slightly. I guess it's one of those we'll have to keep an eye on and see what happens over the coming months to see whether that is a blip or whether it's a sustained statistic, I guess.
It'd be good to look at that in August to see where we are with rentals. I think my message to people watching would be a singular month's figure. It's not enough data to kind of suggest that we're seeing a change in marketplace.
And the other thing is, and as we always say, and although we're talking about the market in general now, it's so subjective to the area that you're looking in, the property type you're looking for, because individual areas now will now behave differently than the general market. So all the more reason to, it's a bit of a shameless plug, speak to one of our agents or use Data Hub on the website to see per area what the exact transactions and what's exactly happening in any one area at any one time.
Good. Any other nice little nuggets you've got for me data-wise before we talk about the news and then wrap up?
Let's see. We've covered transactions, viewings. I think we've gone over quite a lot there. I think that the biggest message to take is there hasn't been a summer slowdown in either our data or Dubai Land Department data.
Yeah. What's happening in the news at the moment? Is there anything of any notes that that's popped up in the news that you think, that's certainly worth sharing with people? Perhaps maybe people being aware of not seeing going on in the Dubai property market right now.
I think in the property market side of things, not really. That we've not already covered in terms of transaction levels, value, what's happening in the market. I think this is going to sound an odd one to pick out, but there was another news announcement yesterday about another new intersection being built and a new road, because the reason I pick it out, in any major city, anywhere in the world, whenever you improve infrastructure, you bring industry, you bring jobs, you bring residential developments or increase the popularity of residential development. So for me, any new infrastructure is big because it brings more attention to the property market and generally an increase in property prices.
But you know what? If you are looking for news, the best place to go on it is allsopp.com. We've got a fantastic news and blog section. We've got a fantastic comms team that constantly update what's going on in areas, in the market as a whole. So check that out. The Dubai Property Market Report for July is actually available to download on our website, allsopp.com. You'll also find links on our social channels. Download it. It's definitely worth a read because it will help you be a little bit more informed and have a bit of ammunition if you're deciding to buy, sell, rent. And if you can, it will help us a lot. If you can subscribe, comment, give feedback on Apple or Spotify for our podcast, it would be really helpful in terms of discovery of the people being able to see this podcast. My name is Carl Allsopp. This is Paul Kelly. This is Taking Care of Business. See you later.
Thank you.